right. Good afternoon, brothers and sisters of sobriety. This is Vinny. I'm an alcoholic and an addict.
I'm Sam. I'm an alcoholic and an addict.
And it is my extreme pleasure to welcome a girl that I grew up with and a good friend. I'm not going to tell you how long because that'll give away how old we are. But her name's Dorthi, and she has an incredible story to tell.
Hi.
How are you today, Dorthi?
I'm good.
Good.
Happy to be here.
Thanks
Good. And thanks so much for being a part of this. As you know, this podcast is about addiction, recovery, prevention, grief and loss regarding addiction and prevention. But you have a really unique story to tell because it doesn't involve you per se. It involves your children. So why don't you tell me, why don't you go back to the beginning and tell me first of all about your son, Dean.
Okay. This is the hard part.
Take your time.
Going back to the beginning is the hard part. So yeah, bear with me. Dean would have been 33 today. Not today. He would have been 33.
Right. Yep.
And we lost him. It will be 11 years, August 10th, 2013. It'll be 11 years that we lost Dean to addiction, directly from a suicide, directly related to relapse in addiction. He was fighting so hard. We knew he was struggling, and we thought he was okay, and he was not. And we lost Dean, and it devastated us. I mean,
for years, and even to this day,
yeah,
I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, you can clearly see.
Absolutely.
It's always still there.
Yep.
The reality is, however, that I feel that Dean has inspired me in spirit for all of these years. If it was not for that, I wouldn't have survived.
Mm-hmm.
And he has inspired me to move forward. I say often that I feel like he's sitting on my shoulder, and he is with me doing all the work that I do today with parents in grief and with men and women in recovery homes, that we are trying to help and give them what I perceive that Dean didn't have back then. You know, what the missing piece was.
Support for Dean.
Yeah.
Right. So support for the people that...
Yeah.
For both the people that have lost children and the people that are still struggling through this with their children.
Exactly. And the people in recovery, the people in early recovery. I have spent countless hours trying to figure out what was it that was missing in Dean's recovery, why he didn't succeed in his recovery, why he kept relapsing.
Gotcha.
What was missing? And in my humble opinion, I truly believe that it has everything to do with your emotional health.
Absolutely.
In other words, you know, I sat and told Dean, listen, none of the past matters. What matters is you being well, you have support, recovery. That's all that matters. It doesn't matter that you lied, cheated, and stole.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't matter. You know, all those mistakes can be fixed. I feel that when you know, that self-forgiveness is a huge part that's missing in the guys and in the girls in the recovery homes, that if they don't reconcile that self-forgiveness to really forgive themselves and let go of the past in order to move forward.
Yep.
And again, how do you do that? You know, it doesn't happen overnight. It's very, very hard work. And
I've found in the past that there's people out there that go to recovery, they go to treatment and they start recovery and they want to apologize for everything right away. They want to try to fix the past. And I always tell them, you didn't ruin things in a month. You're not going to fix them in a month. And sometimes people just can't get over that. Sometimes there's a reason we have step 8 and step 9 in AA or NA. Step 8 is you make a list of people that you've harmed in the past. Step 9 is you approach them and you make amends with them. A lot of people want to shoot straight to step 9 right away. And if it fails, they can't really handle the failure.
Right, exactly. And that's what we try to work with the men and women with. Even if that person does not give you their forgiveness, you can still forgive yourself.
Oh, you can move on from it.
Forgiveness is freedom, and forgiveness is power. And you have to realize that you are worthy of recovery, irregardless of anything.
But the main point is you shouldn't try right away, because a lot of people do try right away,
Right.
and if they're rejected, they can't handle the rejection.
Right.
That's why it's not step 1, it's
Right.
step 9.
Right.
And you got to kind of get that into people's heads.
But do you think you can start working on self-forgiveness?
Oh, absolutely.
Right. So
from
that's-
day one.
So that's what we're doing.
And that's really tough too, because a lot of people, they've done so many bad things
Yes.
that it's hard to forgive themselves. And again, we always preach the 12 steps because they kind of get you through until you have like that step 12, that spiritual awakening. You know what I mean? But, your son definitely was not alone in how he felt and how he approached recovery and even what happened in the end. He was far from alone. I witnessed this sort of thing, almost every day.
Yeah.
And it's very sad when that happens.
And back then, the community around this area, the NA community, was not as strong as I've seen it today.
Yep.
Like, I often sit in these recovery houses and I gain these bonds with men, Dean's age, and I wish that he could have experienced what we're doing.
Yep.
But the reality is he is, because he's with me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I'm a spiritual kind of guy. We grew up in the same parish in Philly.
We sure did.
And I always look at like there's a plan for everybody that is born. And some people are taken away quickly because God has a different plan. Well, this was all part of the plan too, with you doing the incredible work you've been doing for a decade.
Yeah, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. I'm with you on the spirituality. I cannot, like the phrase "everything happens for a reason."
No, I get that. Not with a kid.
No,
I get it.
When you bury your kid, there's literally no reason. No matter how much good I can do, I can't. It doesn't justify Dean not being here.
I get it.
I don't believe that God took Dean. I don't believe that God had anything to do with what happened to Dean. I believe that God helped me through it.
Right.
Nice.
So
very good.
That's what saves me. And that's what I share.
Gotcha. And it's a great story.
I'm interested to ask, when
Sure,
you started
can ask me
this,
anything.
when you started this, what was your idea, like, for what it would look like, your nonprofit, versus what it's become today?
So I have to give a little background on
Please
that.
do.
So in the beginning, after losing Dean, I was a complete mess.
Right.
I was just surviving. I jumped right into a lot of fundraising, and it was just, Dean's Foundation, which is the Dean DiGilio Memorial Foundation. I did tons of fundraising, and it was all just like word of mouth. Like, oh, Joe down the street needs a copay for rehab. Sure, I got him, And I did that for a while, and it was on a small scale.
I remember the first one, actually.
Yeah. Were you there?
Yes, I was.
You was. You were.
Yes, I was.
So I did that for a while. And then I realized that my whole entire family was falling apart. My son Thomas, after he found his brother.
He found him.
My Thomas and my husband. Dean actually died there was a shed in our yard. It's gone. There's a beautiful garden there now. I vowed to put life where he died.
Oh, yeah.
No, the early parts of
Right. So
the foundation
yes.
versus what it's become
Oh,
today,
so-
and honestly, what you've learned
Right.
along the way.
So we were doing a lot of fundraising and trying to help, and then I realized that my family was falling apart. Thomas dove into active addiction after finding his brother, took his own life in the shed. He hung himself. It's very hard for me to still say that.
Mm-hmm.
Thomas and my husband found Dean. So, like I said, now there's a beautiful garden out there, but I felt like maybe year 4, year 3, after losing Dean, I had to take a step back and try to help my family.
Sure.
You know, my husband was just, he didn't speak, you know, he was very angry. And I was, you know, fundraising, trying to,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
You were filling the void.
Yes. So I took a step back, tried whatever I could possibly do to help Thomas, which he eventually turned his complete life around, and he has a blessed life. Thank God.
Good for him.
And then I went on a retreat in Costa Rica with grieving parents, which was literally life-changing. That was 5 years ago.
Spiritual.
Life-changing. I still, to this day, every day, am trying to implement what I learned there in my life. After that, I attended a grief group with Pam Moles, who has Steps for Hope. She created the grief group through her nonprofit, and I also did. Have you guys ever heard of NOPE? Narcotics
Yes.
Okay.
We saw it on your website, too.
So I was involved with NOPE, Narcotics Overdose Prevention and Education. So through my grief group and through NOPE, I literally met an army of men and women that have lost their children, and we're all out there searching for something. So I was one of them, and all these connections were made. I went on the retreat. It was spiritually life-changing. And after that is when my healing began, right? So say for the past 5 years, I wasn't just surviving, I was healing. And through that, opportunities just came along for classes. So I went and became a certified family recovery specialist. I became a grief educator. And through all of these networks and classes and learning and, you know, awakening, that's how we created Addiction Recovery and the Grief in Between, where we go into the recovery homes, we work with the men, we work with the women who are in early recovery, and we try to figure out what is missing. You know, the 12-step program, it's needed, it's necessary, it saves lives, but we try to give the emotional well-being that isn't addressed there, like self-worth, self-forgiveness, core values.
Absolutely.
I mean, we work on all that stuff.
On an individual basis?
No, we do groups.
You do groups.
And so, for example, we finished a group in May, and a gentleman just came in the last 2 sessions, and he really needed us.
Great.
So I've been meeting with him weekly, privately, until our group starts again. So we'll do whatever is needed. I mean, we meet with the families, we meet with the parents, we'll do whatever is needed, honestly.
Have you? Oh, go ahead.
So your website, I had the pleasure of going on and learning a little bit more. Deansmom.org. Am I right?
You are right.
If you're listening to this, do yourself a favor and log on to deansmom.org. DEANSMOM.org. That's Dorothy's website, and it's you should definitely check that out. If you're in recovery, if you have lost a loved one, it's a good website. Check it out.
So my question was, through that kind of work, providing that kind of service, which as someone who works in the space, I find somewhat unique, right? Emotional support, almost, I don't want to call it case management, but it's almost a personalized service you're providing to someone that probably at first didn't even know was available or was needed. So I would find that they probably don't know what to make of it early on either.
Right. So what we have to do is we go and we meet with whoever runs the houses, and we sit down with them, and they're like, yeah, we're in. We have not been turned down by anyone.
Of course not. Who would turn that down? But it's also, to me, as someone who got sober in a sober living, 8 years ago, we didn't have anything like that. We didn't even have job support. They'd say, you got to sign out at 8:30. Don't come back till you have a job.
Wow.
And that was it. And luckily, I moved far away from the city where I was from, so I didn't really know where I was, which was great because I couldn't get in any trouble.
Yeah.
But we didn't have anything like that. I don't think I would even really know what to make of something like that as someone bringing such a warm presence into the house to just provide, because it's stressful. It's so stressful. You feel very lonely early on. You have zero connection with the rest of the people in the house.
Right.
You're very much on your own. You're going to meetings in a new area. You don't know anyone. You're sitting on your hands in the meetings, not getting your hand up, not engaging whatsoever. So to have someone like you come in and ask me what's really going on.
Exactly.
It probably puts a lot of smile on people's faces.
Yeah. And my partner, Ginny, and I, we work really well together. We always say that she dissects the brains and I make them feel better.
Nice.
The good thing about going into sober living is you not only bring everything you were talking about, but you bring a motherly figure into those sober homes. And a lot of those people in there, they don't know what a sober mother is.
Yes, exactly. Because so many times it's, it's passed down. So many times people sit there and say, my mom was an alcoholic, my dad was a drug addict. I mean, that's just the way it is. And yes, and for me personally, to go in there and say, I hear your story, I know what you did, and it's okay. You're worthy of recovery. And it's not just words.
Absolutely.
It's an 8-week program that we typically do. And it's like, we can't tell you, hey, Vin, you should have self-worth. We can't teach it to you. But eventually with, the exercises we do and the things that we do, we, at the end, they feel it.
They get it. Sure.
They get it. And, just for example, on Mother's Day this year, I got so many texts from guys.
That's great.
I mean, just thinking of you, and it means it's the world, it's everything.
Absolutely. It's great work. And you getting all those text messages on Mother's Day, I mean, that's a sign that it's great work.
Yeah.
In regards to some of the outreach programs in Kensington, I'm sure you're familiar with like Angels in Motion, Carol Rostiker, all of them. Do you
Savage Sisters.
Do you ever do that? Hand out blessing bags?
I've participated in creating the blessing bags, and I happily would participate. There's only so much time in a day.
Of 100%.
So I find that I have to really, focus my energy on what I'm doing. And that's dealing with the men and women in the recovery homes and dealing with the parents in grief. And it works for me.
And your own family, too.
Yes,
You do have a family.
It's very, you have to deal with daily life.
Absolutely.
From what I do, I just see, this sounds very unique to me. I see a lot of 501c3 nonprofits out there. And more often than not, it's usually we provide assistance with recovery house rent, co-pays, deductibles, flights, COBRA payments, all those things. Or it's the blessing bag route, right? Or it's the fundraising route.
Right.
I've never actually met somebody. It sounds like you have some letters after your name now. CFRS
and certified grief specialist.
That actually go in just to provide a service.
Yes.
Like a literal clinical service. Yes. I mean, we can call it that. It's a clinical additional support service, all stemming from the kindness of your heart.
Yes.
Or the need and want to see
make a difference,
better outcomes in these scenarios that thousands of men and women see themselves in. Me personally saw myself in it.
Yeah.
Nothing like this was around.
Yeah. Like when we work with the guys, we say, what are your top 3 things? And for me, it's God, family, and making a difference.
Really?
And everything I do is about those things. So that's what we try to show them. Like, what are your things? What really matters to you? And make sure every decision you make is supporting them. But I need to interject and talk about stepsforhope.org, because that's Pam Moles. She lost her son, Jonathan, very close to when I lost Dean. I met Pam probably 8 years ago. I started participating in her parent grief group, and now I co-facilitate it for her. Her foundation, stepsforhope.org, that's who sponsors addiction recovery and the grief in between. She helped us create it, Ginny and I, and then we go and do the work, but it wouldn't exist without Pam's sponsorship. So I feel a need to
Gotcha.
say that.
Absolutely. Yeah, get that out there too, because
Yes.
that's needed too.
And she has a great big 5K walk coming up in October. Again, stepsforhope.org. Check it out. And
I'll be there.
Come.
Can you take a sponsorship out or something?
Absolutely. Yes.
Cool. Well, we'll be sure to mention that before we end the podcast again, because that's really important. Your donations go to a very good a good organization and support a lot of people.
And like Sam, you were just saying, Pam's foundation does the recovery home scholarships, does the outreach. She does the parent grief group, and she sponsors our addiction recovery and grief in between. She does everything.
Yeah.
All of it in one package. It's quite amazing.
So my other question is, it sounds like you're very busy with this, but what's the future look like? Are we just going to continue? Are you going to try to grow it? Are you going to bring on employees or other volunteers, get into more recovery homes and make this more of a kind of a staple in the greater Philadelphia area?
I mean, that's a seriously good question, and I don't necessarily have the answer. We literally just started going into the recovery homes last May. So it's been a year of doing it. And we want to keep going. I just saw Pam last night at our grief group, and she spoke of someone she met. It's a pastor, and he has houses in Chester. And, we're going to keep going.
I feel like the next step is to get you into some centers, because why not start earlier? Why not start in the early phases so you can follow some of these men and women from the time that they get out of detox into the next house they go to, and you can almost follow them. And this is me just spitballing,
that's a great idea.
Just to follow them, it's almost like an emotional case management team where you can really watch the progression from cover to cover. Hold people accountable.
And accountability is huge. And I like what you're saying, because for me, even in that 8 weeks, and some of the houses we've repeated, we've gone back because it was necessary and we felt like we weren't done. So we were able to go back. And like the guys that we worked with for 16 weeks, to think of them day one and then the day we left, like it's amazing. It's amazing to see that growth.
Transformation.
And it's amazing to see like the light bulbs go off.
The light in their eyes.
Yes.
Yeah. When it comes back, it's...
Yes.
You just know it when you see it. You can see it while not even looking at their face.
Absolutely.
From the back of their head.
Yep.
You just know it. People stand differently.
Absolutely.
A little bit taller.
A little more confident. Sure.
Self-respect.
And I would like to add the name of our program, Addiction Recovery and the Grief in Between. A lot of people get confused and they're like, well, what is this, a grief group? Well, isn't grief in everything in life, right? And so many people are in addiction and can't break the cycle because of loss, because of grief, because they never tended to it. And it's not just loss as in death, it's loss of that life. You're giving up an entire life and leaving it behind. Yeah,
you're giving up your life and leaving it behind because you can't deal with it, like you're saying, with grief.
Right. So we have to really explain, but I would never change our name.
No.
Because that's
course
what
not.
it is.
That's
It's
what it
addiction,
is.
recovery, and everything in between.
Gives you an opportunity to explain it to people.
Yeah, and I would like to also point out that I literally have lived through everything that every story I've heard. I have dealt with it. The only thing I haven't dealt with is violence. You know, my kids in their active addiction were never violent with me, you know, or things of that nature. So I didn't, but I've dealt with, you know, 302ing them, incarceration, rehab, counselor. I mean, it started literally when Dean was a junior in high school.
Yeah, that goes way back.
Sure does.
Can you talk about his high school years for a minute?
So, the story that I will tell, the first time I ever knew that Dean was drinking, I got a call from his friend, lived out the back. He wasn't with him, but his friend got a call and said, "You got to come pick up Dean. He's really drunk." Brian went and picked him up and brought him home. When I opened the back of his truck, it was a Jeep. Dean was, I mean, it wasn't Dean. It was severe. I immediately called 911, and that's how I found out Dean was drinking. He had severe alcohol poisoning. He almost died.
Wow.
And that's how I found out Dean was drinking. Dean did anything in his life to that extent, like that. And it just, that's where it started. And of course, as a mom, you want to think, oh, that'll never happen again.
Or it's normal.
I didn't think it was normal.
No.
Because it was that scary. I mean, it was, I thought he was going to die.
Yeah.
So I didn't think it was normal, but I hoped it would have just went away.
Like a one-time deal kind of a thing?
Sure.
Or he would have grown out of it.
Right.
Yes.
Phase.
And it did not. It did not.
Well, he was, I'm sure, I don't know this for sure, but, you know, we drink to excess, usually for reasons, or we do drugs to excess, usually for reasons, because they make us feel better about something that we're suffering from.
Or for some people, they make you feel normal.
That's me.
I did not know that undiagnosed ADD, I shouldn't say undiagnosed and untreated ADD caused people to self-medicate. I found that out when it was way too late. It was already happening. Dean was diagnosed with ADD as a kid. He had cystic fibrosis. He was on 1 million medicines. And I said, oh no, well, I don't want him on that medicine. You know, if I could go back and change it, I probably would have.
You were being a normal parent, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Your son did have some medical issues, so he was on a lot of meds.
Yeah.
So I could see where you didn't want to put him on another one.
Exactly.
The issue that I have with parents out there when they're dealing with their children is they think they know more than the doctors in that they don't want their kids on any mental health meds. And it's really like, I was undiagnosed with this stuff too. And the only way I could deal with it was drinking because I had a love affair with drinking. And that's the only thing that made me feel a sense of normalcy. So, but now we're in 2024, modern medicine, you have to look at the assessment. You have to look at what is going on and at least try to treat it the best you can.
Right.
Whereas years ago, we never looked at things like that.
Right. And the reality is if you cut your arm and your arm's falling off, you're going to run to the ER and take care of business.
Yep.
But if it's mental health, no one wants to talk about it. No one wants to deal with it. And God, I don't want you to think anything's wrong with my kid.
Very sad.
And that it shouldn't be that way.
Very sad.
Something I see a lot in today's world, right? Because this world has certainly changed, in my opinion, from 10 years ago to today. The way we as a community engage with this disease, the way families are educated on it, for better and for worse. In working with families, I've started to notice that a lot of parents search for an alternative diagnosis. especially for the young man or young woman that's been in treatment, say 5 times in the last 2 years, goes right back home every time, doesn't engage in any aftercare, refuses to get a job, or it's what some people refer to as a failure to launch kid, right? But they're searching for a psychiatrist or a doctor to come in and either diagnose them with some form of autism or on the spectrum or ADHD. And call me old-fashioned, I can't help but be like, you're co-signing this behavior, right? I say that a lot sometimes.
Yeah.
Stop worrying about the diagnosis. Start looking at next steps. Give him a rod so he can fish.
Exactly.
You know? Stop catching and cooking the fish for him every single time. Because you're just looking for a little piece of paper that co-signs this so you don't feel like you're at fault. I was diagnosed with ADHD in 1996. Okay, I was 5 years old. They put me on Ritalin. That moved into Adderall, Concerta, you name it, I took it. I went to treatment for the first time when I was in 10th grade.
Oh, wow.
Went to treatment for the second time when I was in 10th grade. By the time I left treatment for the third time in 11th grade, when I left, the doctor looked at me and he saw that I was prescribed Adderall. He said, "You take this?" And I was like, "Yeah, I take it." He said, "Do you take it as prescribed?" I was like, "Yeah, sometimes."
That means no.
He said, "Buddy, you can't take this. This is a narcotic. You're in here for using stimulants and everything else under the sun. You think I'm just going to let you walk out of here and continue to take this?" I had never been so confused in all my life. I was like, what are you talking about? This is how I learned how to read. I developed with these chemicals in my body. To go back to 11th grade, having taken that for that long, and then have it just go away, it was like my entire life had melted away. I just couldn't do it. And it's a blessing that I stopped then. I wish I could say I got sober then. I did not. But I will say, I had to learn how to rebuild living. And I think that ADHD, from that moment on, I filled that void with a million other substances, alcohol especially. I wish that there was a way we could identify ADHD in today's world of recovery and figure out alternative treatment methods.
Bingo.
But really, really understand its significance, because when we come out of treatment, when we come out of sober living, when we're moving on to the next step, there's so much fear on how you're going to survive, right?
Of course.
And what is there? Prayer, meditation, exercise, clean diet, because that's what they're going to tell you, supplements, herbal supplements, yoga, right? Exactly.
Yeah, all that stuff is good, don't get me wrong, but when I place someone in treatment, you gotta come with more than that, because I always say there's a reason for the drinking or the drug use.
Absolutely.
What is it? Well, is it emotional? Is it traumatic? Is it, mental health? There's something that is separating me from you, me, the addict or alcoholic, and you, the non-alcoholic or addict. You can have a couple drinks and no big deal. So we have to get to the bottom of what's really going on with that person as far as their mental health is concerned.
Absolutely.
In my opinion.
That's definitely the modern take on it, and I will agree with you as well. I mean, I definitely think I still agree that deep down inside I was born with this disease. It was genetic. It's just how I feel, right? Because that's what I was told.
It's a good argument.
I'm completely ready and willing for someone to prove me otherwise.
Do you not believe there's a genetic component then?
I believe there's two arguments.
Okay.
The original argument, the original train of thought is it's genetic. You get it handed down from your parent, or you could do genealogy and trace addiction back 3-4 generations as far as you can go. But what and the new school of thought is all addiction is caused by mental health issues or physical issues. So if you look at genealogy and your genes, is there an addiction gene? Let's go back 3 or 4 generations and let's look at your great-great-grandfather, which I've addressed in previous podcasts. Maybe he saw something traumatic and let's say I'll use let's say he lost a father right in front of him,
Mm-hmm.
gunned down in the Old West right in front of him on a dirt road.
Mm-hmm.
So now the kid's 5 years old. He doesn't have a father
Mm-hmm.
to show him how to be a man, to show him how to be a father. So he grows up and he compensates by drinking or doing drugs. Well, back then, by drinking to excess. Now he has kids and he doesn't know how to be a father to his kids. So what do his kids do? They grow up and drink because they don't know how to be a man or they don't have a father figure. Now they grow up, get married, have kids, and you see how it looks like it's genealogy when really it's trauma from 3 generations ago that filtered down because the original person didn't know how to deal with it. It's just a train of thought. It's an argument, put it that way.
I feel like I'm more I believe both parts. I believe that there is a genetic component to it, but that's not the only factor. Then there's trauma and environment and many personality traits. Like there's many different things, but I do believe that there's a genetic component.
I don't argue with that either because it's the old, like it's the school of thought that has gotten us through this for 100 years. But there is something to someone with a mental health issue that needs to feel normal, because I can go back 3 generations. Nobody drank to excess in my lineage.
Okay.
Both sides, both parents, going back 3 generations. I look at my brothers and sisters; they're just fine.
Yeah. But like, I agree with you, and you could have 2 sisters that both have the same parents and one of them's an addict and one of them isn't. And I just feel like there's some switch in the brain. In other words, when I take a drug, which I've never taken a drug, so if I take a drink, it doesn't switch in my brain. I said, oh, I'm pregnant, I'm not going to drink, and I haven't drank again yet. Right? But I could have a sister that there's a switch in the brain that gets triggered, trauma comes in, and boom, there's addiction.
And maybe there's a mental health issue with your sister and not you. And again, like I said, it's just making the argument for both sides being right, not one being wrong.
Yeah.
They're both right,
Yeah.
because you can probably look at your genes and your parents, your grandparents, your great-great-parents, but you could also look like, okay, well, he doesn't have any of that. Well, okay, it must be some trauma that he went through or some mental health issues that he went through. And like I said, I'm making the argument literally for both sides.
Yeah, yeah. And it could be that a gene is passed down. Some people are just carriers. It skips.
Yep.
I think ultimately, I can't question it too much because I'll never understand it.
Right.
But I just know that when I see it, I know it when I see it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And why question where it came
Exactly.
from?
In the end, it doesn't matter.
Right?
It totally doesn't matter.
It's so complex. It's so complex. It really is.
Yeah, it's not really an argument. It's a discussion. Just like I said, just a school of thought.
Yeah.
That I think we're both right.
Yeah.
To an extent, and I believe in both.
I think mental health has been such I don't want to call it a trend or an uprising topic, but from my side of the street, I see it as a much more frequent diagnosis in today's world from even, say, insurance companies and doctors. Like they want to look at mental health first, even when on paper, this is a substance use disorder patient, right? Or an alcohol use disorder patient. The first thing they want to look at is even the most, I don't want to call them minute, but generalized diagnoses such as generalized anxiety disorder, major depressive disorder, something that I think all of us can say that we've caught at one point or another in our lives. And it's going to become so much more driven. And I think it's great. I'm a bit old school, right? I got sober using the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. It saved my life. It completely changed the way that I think. And ultimately, the only thing I really had to do was do what another man told me to do and get on my
Yes.
knees and pray at night.
Yes.
Right.
So for me to go to a doctor and say, hey, he's going to look at me like I'm a lunatic, which I might possibly be, which is totally fine. But unfortunately, I'm not going to say it's going away, but I think that they are trying to say that there is no provable solution in 12-step programs. There's no statistics that state that actually following a 12-step program works forever, and that's why people are looking to prescribe medications for mental health disorders, because they generate statistics alongside metrics such as that,
Well,
which breaks my heart.
I'll give you a statistic
Please
right
do.
now that's the best that we can have. Monday was the 89th anniversary of AA.
Happy Founders Day, brother.
Thank you. It's like Founders Day, like you said. It's proven. There is a track record. We're all anonymous, don't get me wrong, but it has been around for literally 89 years. And it works, like we always say, it works if you work it. But you have to try something. A lot of people say to me, well, I can't sit in those meetings. I'm like, why? Oh, I can't. I don't want to hear everybody's story. Like, why? It works.
I love when people say, oh, I did the 12 steps. It didn't work. I'm like, oh, you did them? He's like, well, I read them in the book. I'm like, you read them in the book? Did you read them out loud? Or
Right.
did you say them quietly to yourself? That's not how this works, man.
Right.
You need another man to stare you in your eyes and truly see you for who you truly are. That's why it's called a fearless and searching moral inventory.
Step 4.
That's
That's a bit.
one.
That's a hard one, because you have to literally look in a mirror and, again, tell that person that you're sitting with, your sponsor, all your flaws. It's ridiculous.
Unfortunately, more often than not, most men and women aren't ready for step 4. I think you have to be truly, truly broken. Like in the end, I was so broken that I didn't trust a single thought going through my head.
Wow.
My daughter was she just turned 9.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But she was 1, and I was so scared that I would never get to see her again.
Wow.
And I could not get it right. And all I could do was go into an AA meeting and be like, somebody help me, tell me what to do. Because when left to my own devices, like, I'm going to lie, cheat, and steal my way out of this thing. I'm going to take shortcuts, and I'm going to wind up back where I am right now. And I'm really scared I'm not going to be able to be a part of this kid's life.
But you knew that, and you were self-aware.
I was ready. That's where the God factor comes in my
Right.
opinion. Like, that was a moment of clarity, as we say, where I was completely ready to actually surrender. I talk to guys all the time. I'm like, are you sure you're ready to surrender? And they'll be like, no, yeah, 100%. I'm ready to surrender. I'm like, okay, so I need you to, when you leave here, go to sober living for a year, get a job making somewhere between the realm of minimum wage that doesn't require that much of you, so you can really focus on this. And they're like, oh no, I can't do that. I gotta get home. My mom makes the best chicken cutlets you've ever had.
Right.
I'm like, buddy, it sounds to me like you aren't fully ready. You know what I mean? Because this thing took years of my life away.
Yeah.
They have to have what's called the precipitating factor. Your daughter being born was your precipitating factor for coming to the realization that you needed something more. You needed help because you were ready. You were finished. So the idea of never seeing your daughter again was your precipitating factor for getting clean. My precipitating factor was I couldn't go to jail. Like, I'm 5'7". I just wasn't built for jail. So I was like, I can't go there. So I asked the judge to send me to treatment as opposed to jail. It was like, all right, we'll give you a shot. But if you screw up, the prosecutor's going to get a pound of flesh from you. I was like, all right. So, and I'll never forget that. His name was Judge Cafferson, believe it or not. I'll never forget his name. It was August 14th. I stood before him, 1986.
Wow.
And that was called the precipitating factor. Like, if you've been around the program a long time and somebody asks you, what's your sobriety date? You say, August 15th, 1986. And they're like, oh, I wonder what happened on the 14th.
Right.
Again, that's the precipitating factor. There's always a factor that pushes you to go into treatment, and like you don't want to delay it anymore.
Yeah.
You know?
A lot of times I'll ask the guys and the girls, like, what's your motivator? Same idea.
Same idea. Yeah, it's what caused you. And I always ask people today, like even today, I took a phone call, and why you call? I don't want to lose my job. Okay, your precipitating factor was they're about to fire you unless you get help.
Right.
Well, yeah, that's it. Everybody has one.
Yeah.
You may not realize it because you don't ask yourself that, but everybody definitely has a precipitating factor. You had a precipitating factor too to starting all of this, and it was losing your son.
Yeah, it was the only way I could survive.
Exactly. And through those great works, you're helping so many other people to survive what almost killed you.
Exactly.
I mean, and that's sad to say, but when a parent loses a child, you're right. There's nothing in the world that could say, things happen for a reason. Not taking a child.
No.
There's no rhyme or reason that happens. The only thing that you can look back on is look at the great work I've been doing for 5 years. And it's incredible work. People need you to continue to do this work through deansmom.org.
I like to think that it's Dean and me doing the work together.
100%. I totally believe that. 100%. I totally believe that. And, the work you're doing, like I said, is incredible. You probably have so many people that you've helped. And it's just a blessing that people like you can be around to help other people through this, because you were a zombie for 5 years.
Pretty much.
Well, for lack of a better way to describe it.
I was just trying to survive every day.
You were barely breathing. Yeah, you were breathing. You were existing.
You're doing something with it. God bless you.
Thank you.
Seriously.
Absolutely. It was such a good podcast today. I loved sitting here with you, hearing your story and how you did all these things, and your love for Dean is so deep that he sits on your shoulder and he helps you help other people.
I'm grateful.
And I appreciate that. So we're going to probably wrap it up now.
Okay.
And you want to throw anything in the end for anyone? Any words of wisdom?
I wasn't prepared for that.
I think they were all words of wisdom.
I just say, one day at a time. And the most important thing that I could say is reach out for help, no matter what it is, and keep the conversation going, because 99.9% of the problems in the world we can fix if we communicate. So whether it's, your husband, your son, communicate, reach out, talk to someone.
And that's any issue, really.
Absolutely. It's universal. My column that I write for Rojo Magazine is an unending conversation with hope. It's just, we got to keep talking. If we don't keep talking.
And if everybody wants to look up Rojo Magazine,
yes.
I'm sure you can look up all the articles you've written in the past, and I've read them all, and they're all really good.
Thank you.
It's a magazine that comes out of Philadelphia, generally South Philadelphia. It's called Rojo Magazine. You can check it out. Dorthi has a column there every single month, and it's inspirational. It's a great column. But Sam, you have anything you want to throw in?
I don't. I just wanted to thank you. This was so refreshingly different, but I'm really glad we got to come see things from your perspective in your side of the world, the nonprofit world.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
And like we always say, brothers and sisters of sobriety, this is tenacious recovery. And I didn't mention that at the beginning of the show. Tenacious recovery. You have to be tenacious about your recovery if you want to stay sober. Sam?
Thanks again.
My name's Vinny. I'm an alcoholic and an addict. And I always tell people, recover loudly. I never tell people to identify themselves if they don't feel comfortable. Recover loudly so we don't have to die silently. Brothers and sisters of sobriety, this is Tenacious Recovery. I'm Vinny. We'll see you next time, God willing.